This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
So, this week we're doing chapter 10, A Leavetaking. And the symbol is the staff and the leaf on this one. I really liked this quote. And Lan leads Rand into the barn, and he says, Lan barely paused to demand, "Did you look the way I told you, blacksmith?" "I looked," Perrin replied. "There's nobody here but us. But why would anyone want to hide?" "Care and a long life go together, blacksmith."
Yeah, because he didn't look.
Not that hard. But I mean, there's Tom Marilyn is hiding up in the hayloft somewhere.
He's like, "Oh, I didn't even think about it." And it's like, really?
You didn't check that hard.
Really, blacksmith? Like, Lan is so annoyed at the Two Rivers folk in this chapter. He is constantly being like, ugh. I can almost see him rolling his eyes and slapping his forehead, like at multiple times in this chapter. You
can kind of feel the tension rising. We were talking about this during the last one too, where Moiraine's really tired and Lan seems more agitated than normal. They're just stretching themselves, I think.
Well, and they didn't expect to find Trollocs and Myrddraal
and the Dragon Reborn.
I mean, I think they were hoping to find him, but
yeah, but you know, all this stuff at once.
They're getting hit pretty hard. I think Lan in this scene, he's really he knows they're coming for them, and he is saying, there's no time. We've got to go. We got to go. That's definitely his priority, because he sort of looks at the back of that barn and shakes his head, and he's like, no time. I can't look.
Yeah, and there's a clear threat, and if it all were to come at once again, they might all die.
Or at the very least, he might have trouble protecting all of them at once.
Yeah, I think the folks from the Two Rivers don't really understand how terrible the threat is. I mean, they've obviously seen a lot of violence already, but I think maybe they don't realize that this could be it right now.
Why the urgency at this point? Why do they think they're coming after them tonight?
Now they know there are Trollocs and Myrddraal there.
Yeah, and they came last night, so they're going to come again in the night.
Probably.
Yeah, I'm just wondering where the sense of urgency is coming from.
I guess it's more about removing the boys from the potential threat because they're so valuable. And I think Lan is probably mostly annoyed at how difficult it is to round them up and have them have the proper sense of urgency. And he's just annoyed that they're not soldiers, I think.
Right. They're asking questions.
That's probably what he's used to dealing with.
Right.
Other warders, soldiers, and Aes Sedai.
Although, I mean, he and Moiraine have been traveling alone together for quite some time, so they have been out in the world quite a bit.
We get to see a little bit of that in New Spring, but not too much.
But, I mean, the idea is I think they're on the road for 20 years, right? She's almost never back in the White Tower. She spends the entire time going from village to village, tracking down those records where they find out the boys who are born on that day.
Yeah, they definitely talk about it later, and I think you see in conversations between Swan and Moiraine, I think Moiraine only ever goes back, like in that whole time, a few times.
Right, and they don't show that they're friends or any at all. They almost never communicate.
Oh, right.
So they both sort of set out on that mission and then never talk to each other again, other than to occasionally in secret coordinate. Then we get a little bit of ribbing between the boys as Matt sees Rand's sword and says, "Hey, an honest man isn't good enough for him." Like, what? You can't get a bow, An
honest man's weapon. I liked what Lan has to say about that. And after that, you see Matt also make fun of Perrin for practicing, I'm using air quotes, practicing with Half Moon axe.
I sort of imagine that's the way I practiced with sticks when I was a kid, which was just like flailing them around at a tree and hoping that was like kind of like sword fighting. I imagine.
I'm sure that's what he was doing, more or less.
I wonder maybe if Master Luhan gave him some tips at all, or was he like doing it in secret?
He was doing it in secret, and then Master Luhan gave it to him.
That's right.
It's like, you can just have it because I can't sell it. And I always really like this. I don't know why I like this so much, but I just like when Lan says, "That bow is a real weapon," Lan said suddenly. He propped an arm across the saddle of his tall black and regarded them gravely. "So are the slings I've seen you village boys with. Just because you never use them for anything but hunting rabbits or chasing a wolf away from sheep makes no difference. Anything can be a weapon.
I wrote down he's from the school of Jackie Chan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a real thing. You can see that in been listening to all these true crime podcasts that I've mentioned to you before. When someone's being charged like with assault with a deadly weapon or assault with any kind of weapon, it's really just, it can be any sort of thing. Like you can pick up, a chair, and if you swing it at someone, and the judge might say that's assault with a weapon. You made it a weapon. It was a chair, but once you changed your intent.
Colonel Mustard with the candlestick in the library.
Right.
Yeah, that's a weapon. Was a candlestick? Now it's a club. It's just deadly bludgeon. Yeah. Exactly. Just because it's not its primary use doesn't mean it's not also used as a deadly weapon. It's just also a candlestick.
I just always like that quote.
Yeah. No, I also wrote that down and was like, yeah, this is specifically anything can be a weapon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I was thinking about with Matt's sort of disdain for the sword here, and he never picks up a sword.
No, he doesn't, does he?
No. And he has frequently beats the crap out of swordsmen.
Yeah.
With his staff.
Like all the time.
Yeah. So he definitely has a bit of a legitimate beef with swordsmen, but he doesn't really think of it as a weapon, right? He thinks it's a toy.
I think he's just never really introduced to the sword. I mean, he sees them, but he carries a quarterstaff until he gets the
Ashendare.
Yeah. It's a strange spear you carry, Matrim.
Which, I mean, I guess it's sort of got a sword blade on the end of it.
Yeah, it's basically a glaive, and the Eastern militaries had something similar. They called it something different, but
anything Matt can use to get him as far away from combat as possible, he's all about it.
A sword with a long stick on it? Perfect.
I wouldn't touch you with a 6-foot stick, but I'll touch you with the blade on the end of it. And so I just, I want more Perrin and Matt here, knowing the kind of characters they become, and sort of, I want to know what's going through their head. Again, I'm currently about a book ahead on my listen, and I just listened to the flicker, flicker, flicker scene where they go through the portal stone and live all the alternate lives.
Okay.
And like, it was all about what Rand felt going through there, but I really wanted to know what like Matt and Perrin were thinking at that point. And like, they just that
would be really fun to see.
They just give their reaction of like, oh, Matt was lying on the ground holding his head, and Perrin was like, oh, I guess we don't have very many choices, do we? And then like, they never mention that again. But it would seem to be a bit of a formative thing.
Yeah. We never see Perrin talk about that again, do we? That's too bad.
And Matt has an excuse because he doesn't really remember that time, so maybe he doesn't even remember it.
Maybe, but he also has all those other memories that he's always referring to. And Rand, obviously, too.
That's a huge diversion, not even anything about this chapter, so... yeah. But my point is, I would love... There's scenes where I'd love to know more about what our minor characters are thinking.
Totally.
Yeah. So I thought I found a little bit of evidence of Moiraine's compulsion here.
What was that?
So you know how we talked about how the boys got the coins, and we think that she says you should have done exactly what I said and all that kind of stuff. At this point,
I think I see what you're gonna go ahead though. Go ahead. I think I'm getting it already.
Perrin and Matt leave notes, which is exactly what she tells all three boys to do.
Right.
Rand talks to the mayor. He talks to his father. He resists doing exactly what Moiraine says.
He only tells Tam what's going on, but she even told him not to do that.
Right.
And he sort of has a conversation with Bran that could have given him away, but he doesn't specifically say anything.
Right. But he does ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other two boys are just horrified that he would do anything. And I've always chalked that up to sort of awe at Aes Sedai.
Right.
Until I thought about her statement at the end where she was like, you were the only one who didn't fall in with what I wanted you to do. The other two did. And I'm trying to find examples of that, and I see this as one of those examples.
Yeah. That makes me wonder, and I think we might have gotten into this a little in a previous episode, but that makes me wonder how much can Rand's Ta'veren nature affect something like that? Like, can he, if he's not channeling to interfere with whatever like compulsion this might be, could it potentially be his Ta'veren nature pulling him out somehow?
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, that's... But then I can't see why the other two boys would
guiding him in a stronger way than the like compulsion might be, because they're not quite as powerful, like not as powerful as of Ta'veren.
Yeah.
Speculating. I just wonder, like, what is it? Because it's such a like, I don't want to call it science-based magic, but it's like logic-based magic, you know?
The Wheel of Time is really the first series that I ever read that did that.
Me too.
That had magic that was more than, hey, this is what's needed. Magic, poof, we have it.
Yeah. Suddenly your wizard character is like doing some amazing work of magic, and you're like, why weren't you doing that the whole time? We could have used this so many times already.
So I just watched
Wonder Woman.
And there's a scene at the end where she crosses her bracelets, and I had that exact thought, like, why didn't you do that earlier? Like, you could have done that the whole time. Like, I mean, I love the movie, but like that one little bit was me going like, it's like in Voltron when they like, or Power Rangers when they pull out the sword, or they're related, and it's like, what? You could have done that the whole time. Why did you even fight the thing? Just pull out the sword and stab it right away.
Oh, like everyone I know has seen that already. I got to go see it. One of my coworkers described it to me. She said, basically, it's the movie 300, except it's like these super athletic women instead of the sweaty, muscular Greek guys. It's like, you sold me.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go see this.
That's like the first, that's like the opening scene.
Yeah.
And then there's a storyline after that. No, that's a pretty accurate description.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's the Princess Bride kicking butt.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So Egwene appears out of nowhere, and Lan almost impales her, probably.
Well, at this point,
Not quite.
He's already pretty annoyed, and he's
I'm
like...
exaggerating, but...
Well, he did pull a sword out halfway, and
he's
he was
definitely tense.
He's a little pissed. He's a little pissed.
Lan's sword came half out of its sheath. When he saw who it was, he shoved the blade back, his eyes suddenly flat. Perrin and Mat began babbling to convince Moiraine they had not told Egwene about leaving. The ice ignited and ignored them. She simply looked at Egwene, tapping her lips thoughtfully with one finger.
I'll go back to more evidence of compulsion there. Mat and Perrin are reassuring her they didn't say anything. Rand, shutting up.
Doesn't say anything. He's not so eager to please.
Right. But yeah, Egwene notices because, she's paying attention to these guys. Also, she has a crush on Rand, right? At this point, she's watching what he does, and they're not exactly subtle.
Yeah, for as much as she berates them and makes fun of them all the time, she seems to be spending a lot of her time paying attention to what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
So, you could take that both ways.
Well, and there's a scene where Rand talks about how Egwene started paying attention to him when he was a little kid, and then all the other girls stayed away from him, he didn't necessarily choose to have that be, I think it's Egwene who, we know is very ambitious, basically chose the best potential person in the village and chose him early and claimed him early, and that was Rand.
Yeah. There's another example of how I'd like to see what's going on behind the scenes. Rand tries to talk Egwene out of it, and she's not having it. She's like, well, you get to go. Like, I'm not going to lose this one and only probably opportunity to ever leave the Two Rivers and go on this amazing adventure with you guys. She's like, you're not leaving without me.
Yeah, I mean, she's the only one here who really wants to go on an adventure. She is excited to leave the Two Rivers. She's...
Rand is only going because he believes he has to.
Right. And the other boys as well. Maybe not Mat as much. He doesn't want to milk his Das cows. But certainly Perrin doesn't want to leave. Rand doesn't want to leave.
Yeah.
You know, Egwene here, she's so excited to leave. She's run out there in her like slippers.
Yeah. But she did manage to pack her bags and make sure that she couldn't be seen as a burden.
Yeah, she does a pretty
She's
good job
bringing
of
her own
that.
supplies.
But she definitely doesn't get it totally right.
Well, yeah.
You know, she's not an experienced adventurer here. But yeah, she's definitely maybe a little more prepared than the boys are at this point to leave, at least emotionally.
Oh, for sure. She's definitely a little bit more mature.
Which, you know, when you look at girls and guys who are 18, 20, like that sort of makes sense. A lot of times the girls are just a little more mature at that age because they have to be. So just as they're settling down, Thom pops out.
just as Moiraine is saying, no, this is part of the pattern too. Like, she's a part of this. She can come. Lan suggests that they can buy the Gleeman's horse so that Egwene can ride that. And that will not be possible, came Tom Maryland's resonant voice from the hayloft. Lan's sword left its sheath this time, and he did not put it back as he stared up at the Gleeman. Tom tossed down a blanket roll, then slung his flute case and harp across his back and shouldered bulging saddlebags. Lan's being a jerk. Is this part of the pattern too, Moiraine Sedai? Everything is a part of the pattern, my old friend, Moiraine replied softly. We cannot pick and choose, but we shall see.
I think Lan at this point is just thinking...
He's like, are we ever going to leave?
I'm just going to run him through. I'm just going to kill him. I don't, I know he's not a threat, but I think I'm going to stab him anyway. You're pissing me. Like, he's so pissed off right now. He's like,
so done with
not everyone is coming. Like, he went from a party of 2 for 20 years.
Yeah.
To all these people tagging along. He's got to protect 3
extra
farm boys, a girl who followed them for no reason, and now this Gleeman who he doesn't understand or know his motivation is showing up and saying, yeah, I'm going to be along too. He's just like, no, this is too much. I'm just going to stab you.
Yeah. I think he probably also sees this as a security problem, like he does sees most problems.
Thom was set up as a bit of a red herring in the beginning, in my opinion.
You don't know what he's there for? Or...
Yeah, and like he disappears during the Trolloc attack, and his cloak is singed, and they don't. I think that happened in the previous chapter, and they don't really know where he is, and they're like, well, he must have been there, and like if you sort of think about that, you're like, well, where was he? I mean, they never really talk about it again, but it's, to me, very much he's set up as the person who could have brought the Trollocs to the 2 rivers.
You wouldn't be out of line to be a little suspicious.
And I think at this point, Lan is thinking that he could be a dark friend. Because why else would he want to tag along?
Yeah, could be. And at this point, I just thought it was funny that an owl hoots like somewhere up in the barn and everybody sort of jumps.
So I looked up what that would be in a Seanchan omen.
Oh, holy shit. Cool foresight.
Yeah. So
what would that be?
An omen indicating great care should be taken, and the next few days would be ones of important decisions.
That is so damn vague, though. This is like a
fortune
in a fortune cookie.
The other possibility was that a death is coming if the owl hoots twice, but I don't think the owl hoots twice here. So it's not super specific. Because, okay, do you want to hear my theory on the omens of the Seanchan?
Sure.
Seanchan know what truthsayers are.
Right.
They've had them before. So they know like what Min's ability is. And Min sees omens over people's heads. And so I think what they've done is taken truthseer omens, figured out what some of them mean because they've had them written down, and then figured out what happened to that person, and then applied those sort of to real life things.
That makes sense. But would that actually work?
Seems to. As far as I've been able to tell in all my research, every time Tuon says this omen means X, Y, and Z will happen, it happens.
She gets it right.
Yeah. So as far as I can tell, the omens appear to be as ridiculous as they sound, they have as much truth to them as the Corinthian cycle or the Dark One prophecies, or the Dark prophecies, or the Seanchan prophecies. All of those, or the Aiel prophecies, they all seem to be totally legitimate, even where they seem contradictory. They end up making sense in the end.
Yeah, I never really thought about it before, but you have at least 5 sets of prophecies if you include the Dark Ones.
Well, and don't forget the dreams and foretellings.
Oh, yeah. I just mean all these different cultures have their own set of, I guess, you wouldn't call it a holy book. It's more like a future guide.
Yeah, prophecy. And then even over in Shara, there's a prophecy, which...
oh, yeah. So that would be 6.
Yeah. So we get a lot of prophecy in this series. And the fact that it's as accurate as it is just amazing to me.
Shara, there's another thing I'd always wanted to know more about.
Oh, yeah. Well, have you read River of Souls?
No.
That's the short story that takes place that describes demon dread.
Oh, I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, it's a short story Robert Jordan wrote about... Sanderson wrote.
Whatever, I'll take it.
But that's about Demon Dread's journey to become basically the dragon of Shara, and what he does, and how he gets the Terangrial, or the Saangrial. He uses basically the Holy Grail.
What was that?
The Saangrial he uses in the last battle.
I don't remember. Specifically.
Yeah, so it's, you know how he's out on the battlefield and he has a full circle behind him and he's channeling the whole time and he's like devastating the battlefield and calling Rand to come out and fight him.
Yeah.
So he's using a Saangrial that's basically described as a cup or a chalice.
Oh.
And it's a crystal chalice. It's basically the Holy Grail. So there's obviously he goes through a whole process where he gets that and takes over Shara and fulfills their prophecies. And there's a short story out there that describes it.
Oh, I got to read that.
Yeah. Yeah, you do. Actually, I may have to read it too. So why do you think Thom is there?
You got pulled right into the pattern, or right into Rand's Taveran net.
Sure, but he has a reason for joining them, right?
Because he wants to leave with Lan and Moiraine, and there's Trollocs. How else is he going to get out of there?
Okay, fair. I think he's going because he wants to protect Rand from Moiraine.
You think so?
Absolutely.
He did just spend all that time in the hayloft listening to what was happening.
Totally.
Before he decided what to do.
And he had a nephew who he was very protective of, Owen. And who would have been Rand's age.
Yeah, we went over this in a previous episode. I think the one right before chapter 1.
Yeah.
Because that's when that would have happened, right before chapter 1.
Thom's past has made him very protective of the boys. And I think he even says that later, that I went with you because I wanted to...
Oh, I would believe it. I know he says later that he wanted to do his best to keep them out of
trouble.
Yeah. He has a particular way of saying it that I can't remember, but...
Yeah. I think he has an inkling here that Rand may be a channeler and that Moiraine,
might be there to execute him.
Yeah, do something against him. So he's there to protect the boys.
Or all three. Yeah.
And he wants to get out of the town too, and it's good to travel in company and all that stuff put together.
That's the reason that he says out loud, but what we know about Thom is that he's probably, if he's giving a reason out loud, that's probably not the reason.
Right. Or one of many.
Yeah.
Yeah. He might also have a little bit of a crush on our little Aes Sedai going on here.
Maybe a little.
Yeah. It's hard to know exactly how early that starts. But they're totally... Because they had that conversation where they were talking to each other on 3 or 4 different levels. Mm-hmm. And I can just imagine him going back and being like, damn, that was hot. And he talks about her blue eyes. Yeah, I can imagine him at this point being a little attracted to her. And that might be another reason to go along too. The next quote I wrote down was Perrin going, "Wolves!"
Oh, yeah. I wanted to bring that up too. Oh, right. The owl. That's why I was getting into that.
Sorry, I took you on a little detour there.
That's okay. And Lan shakes his head and says, better if it had been wolves. And then Perrin says,
Wolves?
Wolves don't like Trollocs, blacksmith, and Trollocs don't like wolves or dogs either. If I heard wolves, I would be sure there were no Trollocs waiting out there for us.
Just a little bit of foreshadowing there.
Yeah, there's no wolves.
I mean, and just Perrin saying wolves, like, because he's going to be...
Oh my gosh.
There's actually a little scene here that I had never noticed before. I don't know. Somehow there's a little paragraph describing a dozen men from the village and the surrounding farms, some in helmets or pieces of armor that had lain dust-covered in attics for generations, all with a spear or a wood axe or a rusty bill. Mm-hmm. Just sort of seeing the townsmen get sort of suited up and armored up for the first time and like start to patrol.
Yeah, they're beginning to get organized.
Yeah, I completely... My eyes have skipped over that paragraph almost every time I've read this.
I always kind of liked that, but Lan makes fun of them, for lack of a better term. He says something like 2 Davil. Yeah, here it is. 2 Davil Trollocs would have all of them for breakfast, Lan muttered when the sound of their boots had faded. But they have eyes and ears.
Yeah, and this is certainly just the beginning of them arming up. But it's nice to see them sort of start to do it at this point, and it makes sense that later they're able to maybe equip themselves a little bit quicker because they've already pulled out all the armaments out of the under the beds and out of the chests and all that kind of stuff, and dusted them off and made sure everybody's armed and sort of thought about their emergency plans a little bit.
And they really quickly learn over the next about a year, I think it takes them to become pretty organized, and they really quickly learn some the old line of spears with archers behind.
And they certainly have help from Perrin coming back with a couple of trained warders and Aiel to basically whip them into shape.
Yeah.
For really getting battle proficient.
But they have those longbows.
Which Matt takes advantage of here. That's what he brings with him. Mm-hmm. And that's an incredibly effective weapon.
What happened to Rand's bow? Did he break it?
It got broken. The Trollocs broke it when they were raiding the house. So he had it with him on the walk back, but then it was he says it was broken into cleanly. He gets another one. Well,
doesn't he make it?
Yeah.
That's skillful.
It's advertised as a staff, but he recognizes it as a bow stave and then whittles it down and makes his bow out of it.
Gotcha.
That's a scene much later. Just notice the Devil Trollocs is sort of a way to say the devil Trollocs.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about all the Trollocs being various types of demons, or, you know, you've got demon, you've got devil now, kobold.
Yeah.
Yeah, just this is another one.
And after the party leaves town, Rand spots the Draghkar against the moon and mentions it to Lan. And that's pretty much the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
Lan demands that they all speed up now, and they sprint all the way to Watch Hill.
Yeah, and I sort of think of the Draghkar as basically vampires.
Yeah, that's pretty much Draghkar, Dragon.
Or Dracula.
Yeah.
Draghkar, sort of a shortening of that. And I always think of them as... do you remember the Master from Buffy?
No, I never watched. Yeah. I never liked it a whole watch through of that show.
But he sort of had like a red mouth, and like at one point she calls him Punch Mouth, and I kind of like imagine the Draghkar having this like red punch mouth when they're sucking the souls.
Oh yeah, don't they have like big puffy lips or something?
Yeah, because it's all about the kiss of the Draghkar, right? Because they kiss you and they suck your soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they're associated with bats. They have the big wings.
Right. Yeah. So very vampire-esque.
They're supposed to be as dangerous as a Myrddraal. I mean, they can fly, which helps, but...
Yeah. Well, the crooning, too, is pretty dangerous, because it seems to be unless you're actively channeling, you're susceptible to the crooning.
Do we see any good examples of people not being affected by the...
Oh, yeah, multiple times. Especially later when Rand is with the Aiel. There's a couple of times when the Draghkar assault them, and...
That's right.
He's unaffected because he hears the crooning and happens to be channeling at the time.
I guess the void would help too, because we see that happen to Lan and the warder of another Aes Sedai, I forget. But there's that great scene where they like simultaneously yell "embrace death" and stab through the not Mirjal, Draghkar together.
That's in The Great Hunt. It's when Moiraine is visiting.
Oh, is it that soon? I thought it was later.
Yeah,
I couldn't even place it.
Again,
because
because I'm listening to it, so I just listened to that scene. So
Yeah.
it's where she's visiting Adelius and her sister.
That's right.
And she's just basically
Like retired Aes Sedai.
the retired Aes Sedai who are doing research, and she's just trying to find information about the Dragon Reborn. She's trying to figure out what to do with Rand at this point.
Yeah.
And so she's like, she can't go back to the White Tower, so she's looking for the next best source of information. And so she goes to these two old retired sisters, and while she's there, a Draghkar comes after her.
That's right.
And she goes to it.
And Lan and wish I could remember his name, but I think
Thomas.
it is Thomas.
Yes, it is Thomas.
I think he's like a solid Theta character. Like he's around a couple of times, right?
Well, because he hangs out with them in the Two Rivers and is part of the whole Perrin timeline.
Okay.
So he's one of the warders that comes back and helps train all the Two Rivers folk.
Yeah. I'm sure all of you know already, and I don't need to say it, but it's so hard to keep track of all these characters. I feel like vaguely familiar, like someone I met years ago, like, oh yeah, I kind of remember his face, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think that at this point I've read
really...
him so many times that I'm starting to even become friends with some of the Theta characters, as you put it. Like, and that's also why I'm going through and reading and sort of listening to them in advance of what we're recording, because so much of it reflects back, and so many things I thoughts I have while I'm listening to the later books sort of affect how I perceive these earlier ones.
Yeah. I keep reading like a little ahead in the Wheel of Time, and then, we're getting together twice a week to record now, so then I end up going back and I reread the chapter to refresh myself. I'm not really getting anywhere.
So I'm just got the audiobooks on at work, so I just have those at one point, and then I'm reading for the podcast.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of how I separate the two of my pleasure reading versus my work reading, even though it's the same book series. Oh, I need to read something else. I need to get something original.
You read other stuff.
Yeah, sometimes.
I mean, I definitely just pick up books and flip through them sometimes. I saw someone talking about that on our Instagram account recently, that they're just we'll pick up like A Memory of Light and just flip to a random page and read a little or something.
Yeah, that's great. My favorite new author has been N.K. Jemisin. I don't know if I've talked about her. It's called it's the Broken Earth series.
You did tell me a little bit about that.
So the third one's coming out soon in a trilogy, and I'm really excited for that.
Okay. That'll be great, as long as this isn't another Patrick Rothfuss.
No.
So mad that when there was only two, I got so into it.
No, she's. I mean, it has to be done. It's coming out in like August or something, so like soon. So. I'm
just talking shit.
Yeah, well.
Get it together, Patrick Rothfuss. I want that third book.
I just assume all my favorite authors are going to die before they finish their series.
Same with Game of Thrones. I read the final book of Game of Thrones when I was finishing the Appalachian Trail. That was in 2012. That's when the last one came out. If you can't tell, I'm a little upset about that. I think a lot of people are. This isn't news to anyone.
No, anyone in this community. I assume if you've read Jordan, you've probably also read Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, I mean that's totally different worlds, but they're both really fun.
And just the demographic. Because
people who would read the Wheel of Time would also
read the Game of Thrones, and it's so much more popular just because it's a TV show.
It's a self-selecting group,
Right.
There's only so many people who would actually do this.
Just one more thought. The bat over the moon flying overhead is just one of those fantasy tropes again, just like the hooded figure in the forest.
Totally.
I can probably name 2 or 3 or 4 series where that occurs off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Even a couple of like really random other books I've read. Just like, I think there's something very animalistic about cowering in fear as a predator flies overhead.
Totally. There totally is. And I feel like I should point out here, at this point, like, we know already that it's a Draghkar, or does Lan say at the end of this chapter, or the beginning of the next?
They talk about it in this chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Lan says it's a Draghkar, but Rand has no idea what he's looking at, and you don't either, as the reader. It could have been a bat at first, until Rand is like, that just seemed like it was too big.
Yeah, too far away.
Or, yeah, he says something like, in order for it to have appeared that big against the moon, it would have had to have been, like, right in my face.
Right.
So he knows it's not. And that's about the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
I'm always sort of sad that there will never be more. There will never be more of this.
I'm sad about that every day. Which is why I think I have such high hopes for the TV show, because then there'll be something else and something different, and it's not going to be like this, but it'll be of this.
Yeah, I think sort of like this podcast, it'll be kind of a fun way to revisit the series, but you'll never get more original content.
True.
Like, obviously, Robert Jordan's dead.
What?
Ooh, I hate to break it to you, man.
No, I think that there is something to be said with content made around content you love. Like, we read fan fiction we don't read it very much, but people write it for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think we make TV shows out of books we love, and we make movies out of books we love, and because we know they're not the same thing, but sometimes they can be more or add to the mythos.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would argue that Game of Thrones TV show hasn't added to the books in terms of storyline, in terms of cultural awareness, in terms of fan base, and certainly there's going to be feedback, right? The books are going to be different than they would have been if the TV show hadn't been made. Sure.
It's even just a nice way to, I guess kind of like what I was saying, just to revisit the world in some original way. So you don't have to like relive the same. You get to see a different story from the same world.
Right. And you can have your mental visualization of how it looks, and then you can have the on-screen visualization, and they can be different. They don't have to be the same.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or your favorite podcast client.